How about it? You know, the movie Major League, is it Harry Doyle, the Bob Uecker character? When he says, "Let me hear you, Cleveland." Like, let me hear you, Indianapolis, based on the fact that, and yes, it's not going to hold up, I don't think, for the course of the weekend. But is there anything better than spring and early summer in Indy when you've got the Pacers in the playoffs, the weather has broken, I got up today, and I'm like, 70? Okay, let's go. Roll the windows down. Crack the windows open at home, whatever it might be. Let's go. And then last night, a wonderful night at the Can, which is a very cool not-for-profit theater on, just the Near East Side, I guess you'd say. And they're doing a series of films to lead up to the Indianapolis 500. And this was very cool because last night what they did was they showed on the big screen films from the archive footage from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. I know I never say that word correctly. And showed film from the 1977 Indianapolis 500, the 1991 Indianapolis 500, and I'm very grateful for this, but they asked if I could come out and do kind of an opening word along with Jason Van Sickle from the IMS Museum to kind of greet everybody and then just make a couple of comments, add a couple of tidbits, and then, do so at the end as well, which I was delighted to do. I was very flattered and honored that they would ask. And I will admit to the fact that I'm always terribly nervous in those situations, but as I'm sitting there getting ready to do it and the crowd is filing in, among those filing in, Mark Miles comes walking in, who is the nicest guy in the world, but he's the CEO of Penske Entertainment Group and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar. And so now I'm thinking to myself, okay, now I'm really nervous. But it was a lot of fun. It was a ton of fun. But the reason I mention it all is strictly because it sets the mood. It gets you ready for the fact that, yes, the winter's over with, and here we are. We are 37 days away from the 500. I think people know what that means to me. But more importantly and more topically right now, you've got the Fever who are going to get set and underway with their preseason and getting things going here in just a couple of weeks. And you have the Pacers and Bucks tomorrow, game number 1. And what do we now know that we learned at the end of day yesterday, and it was a topic of discussion even during the Q&A film session that I was doing, and that is the watch of Damian Lillard. Last year it was Giannis that, we were anticipating over the course of the series. I remember a year ago with each and every game it was, okay, Giannis, is he in or is he out? Is he in or is he out? This year that is going to be the case with Damian Lillard. Is he in or is he out? And that's one of the things that I do think probably he is going to be in sooner than later, but we will monitor that for certain. Starting off the show right away, we're going to talk with, I mentioned the Fever, their head coach, Stephanie White. They're coming off of their draft. Stephanie White actually will be doing the analysis for the national network broadcast for game number 1. She will be doing it along with veteran of this station, of course, Michael Grady. Those two will be paired together in game number 1 between the Pacers and the Bucks. And I thought it'd be great to have Stephanie on to talk about that and also obviously mix in the fact that the Fever now have complimentary pieces on their roster via the WNBA draft. But let's begin with Pacers-Bucks. She joins us now on the always busy and shockingly still available to be sponsored guest line. Stephanie White joins us. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Listen, I just got done saying it's just the best, is it not? I mean, here we are, we're finally done with wintertime. The track is a month away. The Pacers are in the playoffs. The Fever, I mean, what is there to not like, right?
Best time of year, that's right.
It is. All right, let's begin with this. And I certainly want to talk about the draft and the pieces that the Fever now have that you're going to have to work with. But before that, I know that you've been obviously studying this series because you're going to be doing the color commentary for it between the Pacers and Bucks. So 3 of 4 Milwaukee took in the regular season. First thing for you, both from a player and coach perspective, how much do you read into or dive into or equate what happened in the regular season between two teams into what happens potentially in the postseason?
I mean, I think you certainly take it into consideration because there are tendencies that happen. There are ways that you've played certain scenarios, whether it's defensively, coverages, matchups, offensively, point of attacks, what you're looking to exploit. So you use it as a frame of reference, But at the end of the day, it's playoff time, it goes to a different level. Rotations shorten, intensity is up. You've got to be able to make quicker adjustments, and you've got to be able to be consistent throughout the course of a series.
When you were, let's begin from the player perspective, okay? And maybe it's different for every player, Stephanie, but when you are going into, I mean, you've seen it both from a player and then also in having to kind of evaluate the players from a coaching standpoint. Fans get so caught up in the postseason. Fans get nervous for it, right, and start overanalyzing. How do you avoid players doing that? And do players themselves begin to overanalyze and micromanage themselves in the postseason?
And I think the nature of the beast is oftentimes players are perfectionists. Of course, you tend to sometimes overanalyze and micromanage. I think that's where our coaching perspective to being able to see the big picture. At the end of the day, they're great teams, right? Great teams are in the playoffs, so you got to be willing to live with some things, right? And you got to be able to play the percentages. You've got to be able to trust the longevity of a series. I think there is, less margin for error because it is the playoffs, but you ultimately have, multiple opportunities, which is why game one is always so important. If you're at home, you want to take care of home court, right? If you're on the road, you want to steal one, certainly. But I think you can get to that point, but you've got to be able, from a coaching perspective, to keep them focused in on keeping the main things, understanding that there's a smaller margin for error, but going out and doing what you've done all season long puts you in a position, especially for the Pacers, to be the 4 seed and to have home court.
What jumps out at you, Stephanie White, about Milwaukee not involving Giannis? I mean, which is a weird way to ask it, right? Because he is playing at a level that is as good as anybody in the league. But what else do they pose that's dangerous?
Their three-point shooting. Certainly you look at their three-point shooting, you look at the additions on the roster from a season ago. You look at, the way that A.J. Green has elevated his game and the consistency without Dame on the floor to have multiple three-point shooters around Giannis. He's really relished that point forward role without Dame on the floor, and he's doing a much better job of finding his shooters, and they're knocking them down.
When you look at the way Giannis plays, and point forward is, that's reality, right? I mean, he can run an offense from the wing, and then, of course, you have the danger of the fact that he can get to the rim so quickly, right? Defensively speaking, what do you do to, I guess, be able to determine whether it is a play where he is facilitating or he is going right to the basket? Does he show a tendency of tipping his hand a little bit of what defensively you can do to try to stall what it is that he's trying to operate in a half-court set, if that makes sense what I'm asking?
I don't think as much as he used to. There were times where the ball used to get stuck in Giannis's hands. Like he was trying to make a play. You could ISO one-on-one. He wasn't maybe not as willing of a passer is the right word, but he wasn't as instinctual of a passer in terms of his timing, delivery. I think he's much better in that area. And so I think it makes it really difficult. And for the Pacers in particular, they don't have one guy who can match up with Giannis. And so the question, for Coach Carlisle is how deep are you going to go in the rotation? Are you going to use up opportunities to foul Giannis? Asking Pascal Siakam to guard him one-on-one sometimes wears him down on the defensive end, so you might not get as much on the offensive end. And at the end of the day, from a game planning perspective, what are you willing to give up? Is that Giannis's twos and you depend on your ability to shoot threes? Because the Pacers have been a little up and down in terms of their ability to be shot makers. Or do you force him to read different coverages by cat and mousing at times? And then who are you willing to give up shots to?
Stephanie, I thought, Pascal Siakam, Stephanie White is my guest who will be on the call for the Pacers Bucks. I thought when the Pacers first acquired him, you talk about the ball getting stuck a little bit with Giannis. I thought there were tendencies. He's a brilliant talent, but I thought there were tendencies, in particular a year ago, at times for that to happen with Pascal Siakam. And the Pacers' offense, I think their ball movement and their fluidity when it's flowing is as good as anybody in the league. Have they outgrown, if you will, or has Siakam kind of learned now over the course of the year to be within that flow, or do they still stall things down a little bit when he gets it on the block?
I think he's learned. I think he's learned to be able to play in that flow. And I do believe that some of that was what he was needed to do in Toronto, to play some of that ISO ball. Some systems are developed for that ISO ball. That's not the way that the Pacers play. That's not the identity. The identity is to get that ball moving and popping and to share it. So I think he's evolved into that. At times it's great to have a guy like that because you can just give him the ball and let him go one-on-one. He can attack different matchups, whether it be attacking from the perimeter or on the block. So I think it is a good balance, but I do feel like he's evolved into what the Pacers' identity is.
For you personally, preparing for games, you mentioned being a perfectionist as an athlete, okay? Mm-hmm. And as a coach, I assume that's the case as well. Obviously, you're very good as a broadcaster. So what is your preparation for the games themselves? How deep into each team do you go? Take me through how you prepare for a series that you're going to do on television with the Pacers and the Bucks.
And I prepare much in the same way I would do a scouting report. So what are tendencies? If I was coaching, what would I be willing to give up? What would I want to take away? Who would I want getting the last shot? Who would I want making the last play? How would I attack? Defensively. So I look at it much like I would, and it's probably not the efficient way to do it from a broadcasting perspective, but it's the only way that I know how. Watching the film, looking at the numbers, and I have a love-hate relationship with analytics because certainly we can use it in any way that we want, to our advantage, to our disadvantage. We can manipulate the numbers at times, but I do rely a little bit more heavily on analytics from a broadcasting perspective as well.
Okay, so when you have been doing that, and diving into, if you will, this matchup, give me something from either side, Indiana or Milwaukee. Give me something that jumped out at you that would not have jumped out at you without that preparation, that you didn't realize until you got past just the box scores about one of those two teams' strength or weakness.
Yeah, I think the ability to have balance for Milwaukee is going to be a challenge for Indiana. The number one in three-point field goal percentage, certainly, but they have made a consistent effort from month to month to be better balanced in terms of their scoring in the interior. Brook Lopez, he had predominantly become a popping, three-point shooting big. Now he's going back to the block with certain matchups. The ability for Giannis to now find his shooters, that's a challenge for the Pacers. And I also think when you look at the Pacers and the inconsistency over the last part of the season with where they've been shooting the basketball, their defense has gotten better. No doubt about it. They bought into it. That's going to always give them a chance to win. But what we saw a year ago in terms of their offensive efficiency, it's been a little bit up and down. And my fear would be if I'm Indiana and Milwaukee goes zone, is it a shot-making day or is it not a shot-making day? And finding that consistency. But the strength is they've been excellent in the fourth quarter. So you get down to it, you go through the ebbs and flows of the game, and I think if you're Indiana, you feel very confident in your ability to win in the clutch and win in the fourth quarter.
Do you, from a player standpoint, Stephanie, especially now in your role as a coach, but also relying on your feelings when you were a player, in the regular season, you lose a game, and you kind of have the mindset of like, okay, so we'll see these guys again in 2 months, but we got another game here tomorrow night on a back-to-back or whatever. So you got to have short memories, right? You got to be, to Ted Lasso quote it, you got to be a goldfish.
Got to be a goldfish, yeah.
Right. But in the postseason, it's a little bit different because you've got to be a goldfish and be able to put a poor performance behind you, but at the same time, you are seeing the same team potentially 6 more times. So you've got to be able to dwell on, or not dwell, but learn off of and build off of that, right? And not forget where you erred because it's the same opponent. How do you, from a coaching standpoint, find balance for your team and not getting obsessed with the errors, but not forgetting them as well?
Yeah, I think it's micro adjustments. You show where and how the errors took place, whether it was lapses in coverage, inefficient rotations, not attacking the matchups that you want, not making the extra pass, not reading the coverage, whatever it might be. It's micro adjustments. And, at the end of the day, when you're in position to win ball games, and sometimes it comes down to just who makes shots, and great players making plays. I think both sides feel very confident in their ability to do that. You've seen these teams time and time again. That there's a heightened level and sense of urgency when it comes to the playoffs. Both of these teams have experienced it. Both of these teams have experienced it at varying, seed levels. So at the end of the day, you go out and you bust your butt. You do what it takes to position yourself to win. And then as coaches, you trust your team to make plays.
Okay, so you've obviously seen Ted Lasso, right, since you knew the quote?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Top 5 show all time?
Top 5 show all time. Yes, I was Ted Lasso for Halloween a few years ago. So big fan.
Okay.
And every time I see Jason Sudeikis sitting, on the sideline in New York, I want to bring a picture of me dressed as Ted Lasso.
I'll bet.
So I might have to do that this year.
Okay, so here's the question. I want to know which, and I know it's probably been a couple years since you watched it, but if you're like me, you've watched it a couple times probably. What player on the AFC Richmond roster would be the one that you most would want from a coaching standpoint, either based on personality or just their ability, their flexibility as a player, whatever it might be?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good question. I thought you were going to ask me which episode I was going to refer back to, but let's see.
Which best episode? Actually, worst episode.
I don't know about worst because I'd have to rewatch the whole series again, but my favorite episode was when he was playing darts. Right, like I think
it's a great scene.
It's a great scene, and I think it spoke a lot about perspective and one of the great scenes. But I don't know. Like there's a part of me that would like to blend some of those guys together, but I don't know. I'd have to really dive in on that one.
So the rumor is that the new season that Rebecca and Keeley have bought the women's team, and Ted Lasso is going to coach the women's team. That's the rumor about the new season.
I love that. And, it would make sense because Jason Sudeikis is such a champion for women's sport. He's continued to support at all levels, in every sport. And so that would make sense to me. And I would love that.
Okay. Segues perfectly into women's sport. Let's go to the women's side of it with the Fever. You guys have had a very busy off season, not only through free agency, but through not one, not two, but 3 players acquired. My personal thought on the draft, and then you tell me if I'm correct in this, it seemed to me like via the draft in particular, you guys did a really good job of specifying direct areas of need and bolstering the accentuation of your roster based on the picks that you made through the draft. But take me through just the off-season acquisitions and some of the things that you've done with your roster.
Yeah, I mean, the off-season acquisitions and what Amber and Kelly were able to do in free agency was huge for us. 2 areas. Certainly, we needed to be able to address, our wing and that small forward position, at least from a starting position. And then we needed to build our quality depth. We cannot afford to have, our big 3 in AB, Kelsey, and Caitlin, playing 35-plus minutes a game in a 44-game condensed season, and be efficient and be as good as we want to be, right? So we had to build our depth. And I thought, Kelly and Amber did a great job with that. And not just playmaking, but championship caliber players who have competed and won championships and veteran experience who, when you look at our young roster, like there's no substitute for experience. They don't know what they don't know. But you bring in DeWanna Bonner, you bring in Natasha Howard, who have won championships, who understand what it takes, who have longevity in this league. They fill that small forward and wing position. Their versatility allows us to do a lot of things on the defensive end as well, which is where we needed to improve. You bring in Sophie Cunningham, who brings a level of toughness, who has found success, who has been mentored by the greatest of all time, and Diana Taurasi, who can be that mentor, for our young players. And you bring in Sydney Colson, who allows us to have a backup point guard that can move Caitlin off the ball, that can get her a spell. And again, she's won championships. She understands what it takes. She's gone entire seasons with a lot of DNPs, but steps up and has stepped up in order to position Vegas to win championships. So you have all of that, great locker room pieces. And then in the draft, it's about getting the best players available who are going to do what we need to do on the defensive end of the floor, who are going to help us with our rebounding and versatility, with length, with athleticism, and who have the potential to develop, because it might not be a draft for us that was that was going to be for this season. We've got depth, we've got championship caliber, players on our roster. It's players who will position themselves to develop. When next year the new CBA, everybody potentially out that's not under contract is going to be a free agent. We've got expansion teams, so you're going to have expansion drafts with 2 more teams. So everyone's roster is going to change. So this player, these players that are drafted, we're looking towards the future and areas we can address in the future as well.
Caitlin Clark needs no help getting space on the floor. Stephanie, let's be real. Stephanie White is my guest, the head coach of the Fever, and also would be working the analysis for the Pacers-Bucks games television-wise. But when you have a player like Caitlin Clark who can get her own shot, get herself space, at the same time, any player like that, in particular a young one, I think always kind of needs, that like enforcer to free them up a little bit and also to just kind of give them a security blanket psychologically. Do you guys have that?
I think we have that. I think we have that in DeWanna Bonner. I think we have that in Sophie Cunningham. Natasha Howard is quiet, but she's also somebody who has seen it all, has played with the best of the best. You think about playing in Seattle with Sue Bird and Stewie, playing in New York as well. So I do think we have that now. I also think, yes, she can get her own shot, but do we always want her to have to create the tough shots? Like, how can we get Caitlin rest while she's on the floor? How can we get rest for her, in a situation where you feel comfortable allowing her to not fatigue and be on the bench? And then on the other end of the floor, which is where we got to get better, how can we bring a defensive versatility that can keep teams off balance? Like, we don't have to go from bottom of the league to top. We got to get to the middle. And I think we've addressed a lot of those areas. And now our job as coaches is to put this roster, rotations, chemistry together with our system as quickly as possible.
Lastly, Stephanie, I think most people would agree with this. When you were brought in as the head coach now with Caitlin Clark here, the thought process immediately was this is the perfect coach for Caitlin Clark because you can relate to being a Caitlin Clark. I mean, you were a great player in high school, a great player in college. You played professionally. You understand every step of the way of what she's going through. You've been around her now more through the course of the offseason and some of the workouts. What about her has jumped out or impressed you? And I'm not talking about in the games. And what also has allowed you to connect with her?
Well, number one, her maturity. I mean, incredibly impressed with her maturity. Her ability to stay neutral, to stay even keeled, to stay grounded. That number one, first and foremost, the way that she handles everything that's thrown at her. And number two, her work style. People talk about work ethic all the time. And what does that mean that you're willing to do what it takes? Yeah. But a work style in terms of how you do it every day. The way that she's locked in and purposeful and intentional. She does not waste a rep. She does not waste a rep. And there are not a lot of players who can say that. And then, certainly when you think about, players that I've coached, there are times where it's like, okay, you might have a bad day, you might have a bad rep, you might have, those kind of things. And I haven't seen it yet with Caitlin. And those two things alone, that's where you separate yourself from being a great player to being elite Hall of Fame type of player. So that's been impressive. I think where I hopefully can help her outside of on the floor is just, look, I get it. Now she's on a completely different level in terms of everyone pulling at her, in terms of the way that she's used by the world, right? So hopefully we can help deflect some of that, help her navigate some of that, be a resource for her, address or deal with some of the things that she might not need to have time to do. And with myself and with Breon January and with Karima Christmas, who have all played in this league, we know what to expect. We can be resources for her, and we want to be resources for her. The sky's the limit, and I think for us to just do our best to ease some of the burden that she might feel that has absolutely nothing to do with basketball.
Okay, the other great scene, by the way, from Ted Lasso that is required viewing, in my opinion, even if people have never seen the show, is when he is explaining to the team when he was a kid, he had a friend that was a Denver Broncos fan in the land of he and all his buddies were Kansas City Chiefs fans.
Yeah.
And his friend had to watch the Super Bowl by himself and got sick by eating all the food, but he didn't care that he was a Denver Broncos fan. He didn't hold that against his friend, but then he realized he wasn't there for him in that moment that was special for his friend, and it has much larger meaning, but it's required viewing, in my opinion, for anybody between the ages of like 12 and 25, for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Fabulous scene. Great lessons throughout the entire show. Stephanie, a pleasure as always. We'll be watching to see what happens between the Pacers and the Bucks. And either way, if it doesn't go well for Indiana in Game 1, like a year ago, they got to be a goldfish comeback, and they could still win the series, obviously. But going to be a lot of fun to watch, and it should be a good series. Appreciate the time today, as always.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
Stephanie White joining us on the program. I'm telling you, I'm excited for it between the Pacers Bucks. And by the way, if you've not seen Ted Lasso, it is, I can't imagine anybody hasn't at this point. It's not exactly current, I realize, but it is a fantastic, fantastic show. I decided I'm going to do something a little bit different with the show today. A little bit different. We're going to talk plenty about Pacers Bucks, obviously. We've got a gift card to give away for Chicago's Pizza, which that alone is awesome because I absolutely love Chicago's Pizza, and I'm excited about a new thing that we're going to start doing each and every Friday with Chicago's Pizza that I'll tell you about. But I have a new vision for today that I'll share with you next. I like what J&V said there. You can't go out and yak it up in game one, right? Can't be like Dinky and just be yakking on a bone. Although the Pacers did it last year and came back and won the series. But it is a different look with Milwaukee now with Giannis playing at the level he's playing. I don't mean to belabor that point, but I think Stephanie White said it really well. The point forward position, he is just, I mean, the way he is distributing now and getting it around to their shooters is what makes him dangerous, aside from Giannis himself. Speaking of different look, there's an interesting thing that happens in sports talk radio, or just talk radio in general. Wide array and opinion on this particular subject, okay? And I'm genuinely curious from you, the listener. I want to hear from people on this. Because it is, I mean, it's kind of a surreal and bizarre thing, no matter how long you've done it, to then realize that you have, you know, some creative control over a radio show. And I have decided, I've made the executive decision, and maybe my bosses will, I don't know if they'll dislike this, whatever. Listeners may not like this. I don't know. If there's one thing I'm not very smart with, well, there's a lot, but one of them is I think sometimes I'm unaware. I'd like to be more in tune with what people like, but sometimes maybe I don't read the room the best. I don't know. What I've figured out is this. This show, to me, the most important thing about it, do I want people to say to themselves, you know what, I found it interesting when I was listening to the radio and the guy in the middle of the day was talking about Anthony Richardson and how he thinks that Jim Irsay perhaps now is reintroducing his day-to-day involvement with the franchise, and perhaps that is why Anthony Richardson now, the leash has gotten tighter because Irsay has decided more so than Ballard that they need to look elsewhere. I thought it was interesting when I heard that guy say that. Or maybe you're saying, I think it's interesting when the guy on the radio, tells stories about like just happening to be at the Long Beach race and meeting Peter Brady and then getting invited to the Brady house for pork chops and applesauce. I found that interesting. But what I want most and more importantly is I want people when they listen, I want it to be fun. And quite frankly, I don't know if I'm fun, right? I want people to enjoy it and to feel a part of it. And what I think that where I have erred is I want this show to be far more interactive, because I don't want it to be my show. I want it to be everybody else's show. The name of the show is Query and Company. The company is all of you. The listeners are the company, right? And so I just got to thinking about it, and I thought to myself, it seems hypocritical of me if I'm calling this show the company and saying that listeners are the company if I'm not in court. Who wants to work for a company where you don't have a voice? Nobody, right? So I got to thinking about it, and I thought, not all the time. I don't, J&V, one of the best things that he does, for example, that I enjoy as a listener is when he does, and I'm not trying to steal his idea, but when he does the like anything goes category and you just call, I'm not saying I want that. But for example, today in particular, coming up here in about 20 minutes or so, I'd like to incorporate more of the listenership of what you are thinking. Everybody knows what I'm thinking about the Pacers Bucks, right? I think it's going to be a really difficult series. And even though the Pacers have home court advantage, and even though they're the 4 seed, you forget this. But when Tyrese Halliburton hit that shot out of the corner, that was the difference right there between this game tomorrow being played at Gainbridge Fieldhouse and the game tomorrow being played at Fiserv Forum or Arena or whatever it's called in Milwaukee. That's the difference in home court right there. And that can go away in a heartbeat. I mean, all Milwaukee's got to do is win one of the first 2. What do they always say? Got to hold serve at home, right? So I think it's going to be a huge challenge for Indiana. And the two reasons for that challenge, number one, I think Milwaukee's got to be feeling good because they took 3 of 4. Yes, I realize that a vast majority of those games, the scheduling was different. I mean, the Pacers were at disadvantage in the majority of the games they were playing in the regular season against Milwaukee. And last year, Milwaukee, I mean, that game one, I'll never forget. I was in Long Beach for the race a year ago and stopped at a restaurant to watch, on my way to kill time before my red-eye home, and watched game one, and I was super excited, like, oh, this will be the easiest kill-off of 2 hours before getting on a flight of all time. And it was like 15 minutes because immediately, the roof caved in on the Pacers immediately in that game, and you knew this is ugly. And they looked shell-shocked. They were deer in headlights. They were literally like Normandale to Hickory. Maybe they're right about us. Maybe we don't belong here. And then, obviously, things came together for them. Patrick Beverley started acting like a complete jackass, and the Pacers rallied together, and boom, and they were off and running. Now, again, no Giannis. I just think that's such a huge factor. I'm not saying Milwaukee's going to win the series, but for a team with home court advantage that worked really hard, had a great year, won 50 games to get the number 4 seed, then the question becomes, what is the expectation for the year? And if they don't win the series, is the year a complete loss, and do you immediately start making seismic changes? Or is this group still young enough, which I think they are personally, that you run it back, that you go team run it back? Which, considering a lot of Pacer fans are Colts fans, when you hear team run it back, there's like PTSD there, right? Speaking of team run it back, Indiana had mentioned, I'm talking about the Hoosiers, that last year, remember, they were going to run it back, but everybody's got to chill. Everybody chilled. They ran it back. It didn't go well, and now everybody's going elsewhere. One of their main players from a year ago has a new home. I'll let you know what that is. And then again, as I mentioned, coming up, 1 o'clock hour, I want to incorporate a little more of the audience, if you're so willing. And it's not because, what I was going to say is, in sports radio, there is, like, all the consultants and advisors. Oh, if you lean on callers, it's bad radio. And it's, I don't mean to say that about you folks, because I love you all. But the perception is that it is a host being lazy. And I get that. And if you're relying on it every segment of every day, there's some truth to that. But I just feel like if you are like me and you're a fan of sports, when you watch games, you want your frustration to be heard, or you want your opinion to be heard, or you want, that's what we do. And that's why sports bars exist, right? Because people like to talk about sports. And I feel like if you are lending me your ear, it's only fair that is reciprocal. Another way, by the way, that I love to thank you folks is to make sure that we're taking care of you in terms of listening to this program with the chance to get the best pizza that you can get in town. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We've got later on coming up in the show a $30 gift card to give away from Chicago's Pizza. Chicago's Pizza, the absolute best, by the way. I mean, right now it's lunchtime, right? Your stomach's growling a little bit. You're driving around. You're like, what am I going to do for – well, I'll tell you what you're going to do for lunch. What's always a good option for lunch? 18 locations in central Indiana, 25 statewide for Chicago's Pizza. Which, yes, the name is Chicago's, but it's based right here, started right here in Indianapolis, and they are Indianapolis heritage through and through. I'm talking about an ownership group that loves the sports teams of Indianapolis, and I'm talking about a group that has a love for pizza and the handmade care that they take with it every single day. Fresh made every day. The dough's made fresh every single day right there in store. The salad bar is fresh right there. So maybe you're not even thinking pizza for lunch, but you want something fresh and light. Salad bar, great option at Chicago's Pizza. And you're doing so with a corporation that is committed to the community, that right there where your money's going stays right there within the area in terms of their give back for schools and different organizations in central Indiana. Breadsticks, fabulous. Again, fresh made today right here. Chicago's Pizza, been around since 1979, Indianapolis heritage, a story told in every slice, because they want to make sure that you are enjoying it and that you have the same passion for Chicago's that they have, not only for you, but for the community as well. 18 central Indiana locations. We're going to hook you up with a lunch from there, courtesy of the $30 gift card for one of you, but we'll do that in about an hour from now. Pacers Bucks, game number 1. We'll continue the discussion next. Corbin spinning the hits to let us know the weekend is upon us. That means NBA playoffs upon us as well. J-Law is enjoying lunch right now up near Geist and points out San Diego weather outside. Hell yes. Because I don't know if you know this or not, folks, but if you look outside right now, it's a little cloudy for San Diego standards. But if you look outside right now, it's like this in San Diego 363 days a year. Life's just easier when it's sunny and you get up and you have energy, you hop out of bed. Like, let's go. It's just easier. Now, it's supposed to rain the entire weekend, right? All day tomorrow. Who cares? We're going to be inside or watching the game, or you're going to be somewhere watching the game. But this is why we wait through the wintertime in Indiana. Now, in terms of waiting through the wintertime for one guy who grew up in a cold weather northern climate, next year going to be a little warmer during the basketball season because Mackenzie Mbako, we now know, is going to Texas A&M. Headed to Texas A&M to play in the SEC. Look, this is why I just get fatigued by the recruiting stuff. Because, and I think Indiana fans are guilty of it more so than like seemingly any other fan base. All fan bases do it, I realize, but and I see it with like Clemson football. I mean, I'm a Clemson football fan. I see it with that as well. I'm not going to lie to you, but every single time, like people get obsessed with, we've got to get this player. We've got to, as soon as if there's a player that is considered to be like a top, 50 recruit or whatever it might be, and that player has your school, insert name of school, as their final, 5 or final 3 or whatever. Fans become obsessed over this notion and this thought process that not getting that player is going to be a disaster, and that getting that player is some sort of cemented nail of the final puzzle that, yes, you are back into the stratosphere of the elite. And I'll pick on Indiana fans a little bit when I'm talking about it, just because I guess as somebody who grew up watching Indiana and then went to Indiana, it's the school, admittedly, by which I'm the most familiar. But Purdue, I think I mentioned yesterday Mike Robinson. When Glenn Robinson left and they got Mike Robinson, I think that was his name, from Illinois, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, this guy's a top 20 player, big dog and little dog. It was, he was fine. Eric Gordon committed to Indiana, and Purdue seemingly got like the consolation prize of E'Twaun Moore. And E'Twaun Moore had 5 times the college career of Eric Gordon, who's a wonderful talent. But did Eric Gordon really change the trajectory of Indiana basketball? E'Twaun Moore put Purdue, along with Robbie Hummel, obviously, on the perfect path, and Juwan Johnson, right on track. So recruiting itself is a crapshoot. And Mackenzie Mbako is a good example of that. What I always say about the NFL draft and drafts and acquisition of players in general, oftentimes a player is judged by how and where they were acquired. Mackenzie Mbako's career at Indiana, what do you average? 12.5, 13 a game this year. At times, an electric outside shooter that could catch lightning in a bottle. A solid player. Solid. And for Texas A&M, it's a huge get because that you're getting a player now in the transfer portal where it's like free money kind of. It's like the Pacers with Thomas Bryant. It's just like, I don't know, this guy was there and we got him, and now look, he's playing well for us. We didn't have to give up a lot for it. In Indiana's standpoint, because he was acquired as a top 15 recruit or whatever it was, 5-star recruit, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be unbelievable. Okay, he's fine. Is Indiana basketball in any different position or situation upon his departure than they were upon his arrival? So it's easy now to look towards it and say, man, what's Indiana going to do? They lost, look at all the players they're losing. Well, I think Darren DeVries, it is curious to me that seemingly, and maybe this speaks to loyalty towards Mike Woodson, it is curious to me that by appearance, not saying this is the case, yes, I know that Luke Goody would like to come back for a final year and is petitioning with the NCAA for that. And I know that Sisley, the one recruit they have coming in, is still committed to Indiana. But outside of that, it is kind of curious that when they made a coaching change, that seemingly, not saying reality, but seemingly by appearance, every player on the roster decided to move elsewhere before even meeting with their new head coach. And part of that, of course, is just the era we live in. The portal era. Yesterday, I thought it was interesting with Brian Newbert of goldenblack.com when talking about Purdue and the pieces that they have in and the reason for this basically cash rush, right? This is like the land rush of the gold rush of 1849 or the land rush of the Sooners. It's like that, but in NIL terms, all of these players are trying to rush to the big payday before this now becomes – there are guidelines on how much a school can spend and who's going to legislate it and, we'll call it salary cap, for lack of a better phrase, of the employees of respective schools. And so that's why you're seeing, understandably, players wanting to move and cash in while there are no rules and regulations. Like if you were going to go and watch the Oprah Winfrey show, you want to go in the one where she's giving out cars. You get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. And then if you know that the FCC is about to put limitation on how many cars can be given out at a television show, and that doesn't take place and go into effect until July 10th, I'm spitballing a number, then you're going to make sure that you go to the Oprah show before July 10th because your chances are better of getting a car, right? Same thing here. But the one thing that Brian Newbert pointed out, which I thought was an interesting point, is we don't know how the NCAA is going to be able to legally, now that Pandora's box is open and the toothpaste is out of the tube, how do you regulate where and how often a player can transfer and the number of schools they can go to? If a guy wants to go, or a gal, wants to go to 4 schools in 4 years and seemingly take a step back 15% on their credit hours towards the completion of a degree every time they do so, that's kind of on them. And I think we lose sight of and forget that when the NCAA talks about, quote, student athletes, the more that they're allowing transfer, the more they're taking the student aspect out of that. Because if you are somebody that starts at Indiana, plays there for a year, transfers to Missouri, plays there for a year, transfers to Texas A&M, plays there for a year, and then transfers to Boise State, in the quote-unquote student transfer of credit hours, there's no way that Missouri's taking all the Indiana credits and then that Texas A&M or whoever it was I said next is taking all the credit hours and that Boise State's taking all the credit. I can tell you, as somebody who had a circuitous college journey, I started at University of Kansas, total disaster granted, transferred to IUPUI, not all of my credit hours transferred. And then even from IUPUI into Indiana Bloomington, I had some credits that did not transfer. So I can only imagine if you're going to 3 schools in 4 years or 4 schools in 4 years, how many you're losing and what the student-athlete aspect of that is. But that's the other area of all of this. I think that we're going to get under control the money aspect of it and players jumping from one school to the next for the sake of money. I think that part is going to start to be regulated a little bit. But for the sake of opportunity or convenience, I don't know that we're going to regulate how often a player can transfer. And I don't know necessarily, to Brian Newbert's point, that we should, because look at myself. I went to 3 colleges in 4 semesters. If I'm a regular student doing that And literally every person that I tell that I'm changing schools says, I get it because you got to do what's best for you. If that's the case for a regular student, why shouldn't it be for a quote-unquote student athlete as well? But it's going to make it continue to be confusing because it is free agency, and it is going to make it harder to follow your favorite team, your favorite players, because you just never know. You know, I'm watching the NIT finals, and it was UC San Diego, and the guy at the free throw line transferred from Chattanooga who they're playing. You know, and it's they're vagabonds. I get it. I totally get it. But Mackenzie Mbako to Texas A&M, and, obviously there are going to be more players that you're going to hear about that on the regular for sure. All right, when we come back, Trucker Rob will lead us off. He wants to talk a little Pacers and Racers. But I do want to incorporate more of you. If there's something this week that was said that you agreed with, that you disagreed with, that you're chomping at the bit, that you went home and you said, listen to what I heard on the radio, and then you thought, I don't necessarily, here's my thought on that. I think it's important to be able to occasionally lend the ear in reciprocation of the fact that I ask you so often to lend me yours. So if you want to chime in on anything, you can do so, and we're going to give away a $30 gift card to Chicago's Pizza, all here in the 1 o'clock hour coming up, Query & Company.
Franklin Township Intermediate School.
Outstanding. Now, have they ever been to a Pacer game or just not a Pacer playoff game?
We've been to a few Pacers games. This is their first playoff game, though.
Now, here's the real question, Casey. Do they know yet they're going to the game, or are you surprising them about the fact they're going to the game?
No, they know. Funny story, I was going to buy them some cologne. I was looking at the price of that cologne, and I said, hell with this. We're going to a Pacer playoff game.
I like that. What kind of cologne were you getting the kids, just out of curiosity? 11-year-old guys in cologne. I like it, right?
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the brand.
Well,
It's
listen,
all
Casey.
$100 plus bottles.
Hey, man, listen, and I'm a cologne guy. I love colognes. I got, way too many colognes. I have a problem with it, Casey. But Paul and Samuel and Casey at the game, love it. Love it, Casey. And here's the thing, and this is the thing I want you to remember more than anything else, okay? I went when I was in the 6th grade, so I would have been 11 or 12, and my dad and I went to a Pacer game, and I loved Wayman Tisdale. I was super excited to see Wayman Tisdale. I've been, Casey, to I don't even know how many Pacer games over the years. I've been very fortunate in that regard. But I will never forget going to that first game with my dad, and likewise, because it's the playoffs, Paul and Samuel will never forget the fact that their dad took them to their first playoff game to see the Milwaukee Bucks in 2025 in Game 1. So job well done there, Casey. Enjoy it and soak it up, all right?
Yes, sir.
There we go. Okay, listen. The cologne, Corbin, that's a strong dad move right there. Going and buying cologne for the kids at the age of 11, but opting for the game instead, right?
Right.
They can wait a year or two on the cologne.
Yeah.
Now, when I think the first bottle of cologne that I had was Calvin Klein Obsession. And I'm not too proud to admit this, but Calvin Klein Obsession, the bottle reminded me of my father's aftershave, and I thought that's how you applied it. So I had Calvin Klein Obsession cologne my freshman year of high school, and literally would pour it into my hands, splash it on my face, and wear it as if it was aftershave. And I literally think to this day, probably if you walk through Upper D Hall of North Central High School, you can, because that's where my locker was, you can still smell it. I'm stunned that I wasn't asked by a teacher or something what are you doing here, because people are getting nauseous and lightheaded. But I liked it. Brian, talking Pacers. Brian, what's up?
Hey, what's going on?
Not a lot. Brian, how old a fella are you? Can we play a little Get to Know Your Listener? We had a lot of success with this. Kids love this segment when we do this. Are you willing to partake in a little Get to Know Your Listener?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm 66.
66-year-old Brian. Okay. Now, Brian, my quick math tells me that would have put you in the graduating class of high school somewhere around 76 or 70. I'm going to go 77, though. Is that right?
76.
76. Okay. That was from what school?
I started out at North Central, but I ended up in Ohio, Forest Park, Ohio.
Okay. And when you were in high school, if you don't mind me asking, Brian, if you were to go back, if we were to go back in time right now, and let's say, today, mid-April of 1976, you're a month or so away from graduating in the bicentennial year of 76. Indiana's undefeated. Life is good. What's the most likely 8-track jamming inside of your Vega or whatever you're driving to school?
That's weird you say that. I did have 74 Vega.
Did you really?
Yes. Probably Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, man. All right. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so what's on your mind, and thank you for playing Get to Know Your Listener. What's on your mind regarding the Pacers, Brian?
A couple of weeks ago, you just brought back so many great memories of when they were in 1970 when they scored all those points.
Yeah, the NBA record, or the franchise record, excuse me, yeah.
Right, and me and my brother were in a fort, and I always had a radio with me, and I kept track of all the score, and then when you said John Barnhill was the leading scorer, I became friends with John Barnhill at the JCC and helped him do a camp, and he was a great guy.
I was stunned.
I hope he still is. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not. But
I believe he is. I was stunned when you think about those great Pacer teams and that team that scored whatever it was, 170 or 177 points,
right.
the franchise record. I think you'd win a lot of bar bets by seeing how deep you could go before people would nail that that's the guy that was the leading scorer, right?
Oh, right. I have a trivia question for you.
Okay.
Who is the only NBA, ABA player, and college player to win all 3 titles?
Tom Thacker.
All right, the dog.
That's right.
Very good.
That's a great question, though. It's a great trivia question.
University of Cincinnati. And
correct. All right, how about
Boston
this one? How about
Pacers.
this one on the way out? You ready? Tell me the
Okay.
only player to lead the NCAA, the ABA, and the NBA in scoring in their career.
Julius Erving.
Great guess. Great guess. Really good guess. No, the guy shot underhanded free throws. That's your hint.
Rick Barry.
That is correct. Rick Barry, baby. Rick Barry is indeed the correct answer. And I love the fact you drove a 74 Vega. Beautiful. So Pacers-Bucks game 1. We talked to Stephanie White a little bit ago about this, and I want to get further into this. I think when you look at Milwaukee, the real trick here, let's assume, and let's do, like, get a deep dish, if you will, on this game, okay, and on this matchup. And when you hear me mention deep dishes on Fridays, by the way, it's going to be your cue to get ready because we're going to give away a gift card for Chicago's Pizza. But when you look at this matchup, and Stephanie White pointed this out, I think it's a great point. You almost wonder if, and I'm not saying that they do this because it sounds very elementary and it's kind of the easy, if you will, go-to comment. But theoretically, do you just assume? I'm not saying that you go out and you say with Giannis, you're going to get your 40. You're going to get your 35. I mean, he could get 50, right? You don't necessarily just say, we're going to let him do that and see what happens. But you account for it. So in other words, it's such a dangerous thing to say because it's such a cliche. But you know you can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him. That's the oldest phrase in the book. Dan Patrick made millions off that phrase. But there's an element of truth to it. When you're talking about a guy that's averaging 30 and 12 a game, and then you look at his assist numbers and his facilitation, especially since Damian Lillard has been out, they basically have put the ball in Giannis's hands and said, okay, it is your show, essentially, right? And you go out and let's see what you can do by operating. And he's always had that ability, don't get me wrong. He's always been a point forward, so to speak, but more so now than ever. And yes, they have guys that the danger in Milwaukee, Kyle Kuzma's been an interesting acquisition for them. Because I think it's taken him a while. If you look last year at the Pacers in this series, it's interesting because in game 1, Siakam was really the only guy that didn't look shell-shocked in game 1 in Milwaukee. And yet they got blown out. Once Halliburton really got things going and then Siakam kind of blended in with it is why this year they really, when they've been playing their best basketball, it's the cohesiveness of knowing that the security blanket of Siakam bailing you out of possessions is there, but not being overly reliant on it. But as we talked about with Stephanie White, seeing and navigating through the facilitation of Siakam within their offense is a lot of what Indiana has done to just mature as a team this year. I think Milwaukee is still in the process of going through that with Kyle Kuzma. And Kuzma has played a lot of minutes for them and has been a nice scorer. But I still think that Kuzma's an interesting guy because I don't think sometimes even Kyle Kuzma knows exactly what sort of player he is or what his role is. But he is a guy, obviously, that has size, that can score, that can stand out and shoot a mid-range. And just figuring out how to facilitate that, I think, is something that they are still processing through. Then you look at, as Stephanie talked about, I mean, their ability to shoot the three and knock it down through rotation. And they have guys that are doing that at a higher clip than you would expect. Taurean Prince is hitting it at a higher percentage than you would expect. The guy that, truthfully, in the game where Halliburton hit the three, she mentioned A.J. Green. A.J. Green is a guy that when he comes out, you say to yourself, like, how is this guy in the NBA? And then you see not only his ability to shoot from the outside, but the quick release that he doesn't need a lot of time to set up to get his shot off. And what they do, Milwaukee, and Indiana does this, the Pacers do this as well as anybody. When the Pacers are really clicking offensively, what they do really well is they come down and it's either, Halliburton has the ball at the top of the key or obviously, Nembhard, McConnell, whoever it might be. And they run almost kind of a high weave to an extent where they've got two or three guys out around the three-point circle, and they start there. But then between either Turner or Siakam on the block or even Nesmith in the corner, they go away from being on the wing. They go inside one time, and if nothing's there, then the ball comes right back out, and it basically very quickly moves around and sometimes even a cross-court into one of the corners for a Siakam or a Nesmith. But their movement of that and the way that they move the ball around is what really creates for Indiana. Now, obviously, Halliburton has the ability, as frankly does McConnell, to get to the basket and immediately break down a defense themselves. Nembhard, on the other hand, his strength is not necessarily in getting to the basket, but being able to step back in a mid-range and be a lights-out 10-foot to 12-foot shooter, which is amazing because in the last 2 minutes of a game, he's the guy I least trust at the free throw line, oddly enough. But Indiana's ball movement and moving around is what makes them dangerous. And Milwaukee has an element of that because with Giannis and his size and his vision, Giannis has the ability to make a quick – and he has not always done this. When they won it all, he didn't necessarily do this. But now what he does is, yes, I mean, he is an athletic freak. There's a reason his nickname is what it is. But his ability to then also get his shooters in position, and they don't need a lot of time. The thing about AJ Green that's interesting to me is he does not need spot-up time. He is a quick-release shooter. And he's a dangerous shooter because you kind of forget where he's very easy to lose on the floor. But again, a 43% shooter from three-point range. When you've got multiple guys shooting over 40% from beyond the arc, you're dangerous. And they're very dangerous. I said for 3 weeks that between Milwaukee and Detroit, if I'm the Pacers, I would rather see Milwaukee because they were a more known entity and Detroit was young enough and naive enough to not understand they're not supposed to be there. And I'll be honest, I'm almost, in the last couple of weeks, the more that I've looked at it, and I mean, we haven't even gotten to like Brook Lopez and his ability to step out and shoot. The more that I look at them and what they do, the more it worries me for the Pacers, quite frankly, because they just create matchup problems. And Lopez is just, he's really kind of annoying, is he not? I'm not going to say he's a goon, but he looks too much like Frederick Sykes from the one-armed man from The Fugitive. He just does. But it's the ultimate compliment. I mean, Bobby Portis is a pain in the backside because his role is to be a pain in the backside, right? And Bobby Portis is the kind of guy that you hate him when he's on the other team, but you kind of like him when he's on yours. And it's easy to forget this. It's easy to forget this. But who's the most popular Pacer of the last 15 years that was not a mainline superstar? Probably Lance Stevenson, right? And before that, probably Ron Artest. are guys that we loved here in Indiana because you loved it. I had a guy tell me the other day, he's like, man, Lance Stevenson, when he got down and he blew in LeBron's ear, I loved every minute. People went crazy for it. The greatest meme ever, right? But if that guy's on the other team, you can't stand him. And so it's credit and kudos to Milwaukee that they have a couple of guys on their roster that, truth be told, fit that bill. That if you can't stand them, but you'd love them if they played for you. Bobby Portis was a guy, actually, I think he came out, I could be wrong in this, I'm pretty sure he came out in the Miles Turner draft. And I think I remember that year, we were all making our prediction on who they were going to draft, and I remember saying that I thought Bobby Portis out of Arkansas was a player that the Pacers, they'd had him in for a couple of workouts, and I just liked what he does. Now, again, Bobby Portis, you look at right now and you say, does he seem like a fringe lottery pick type performer? Probably not, but a solid career as a role player in the NBA. But again, also kind of a pain in the backside. That's why you like him. And apparently not always abides by the rules. And they're figuring out how to play with him, back into the mix as well. Each and every Friday when we do kind of a deep dive on a certain topic, that means that we're going to give away dinner, lunch, whatever it might be for Chicago's Pizza. You've heard me talking about it, and folks, I want to hammer this home again. A couple of weeks ago, and I love this. I'm not saying that all places don't offer this, but not to this level. When it was known that we were going to be partnering with Chicago's Pizza, Ron, the owner of Chicago's Pizza, and each and every manager and owner of all the local Chicago's Pizzas had me down to their store in Greenwood, right there near Greenwood Park Mall, to come out and meet all of them, and they wanted me to hear the passion they have for what they do. And that meant a ton to me because it was important for them to know and to let people know how much being a part of the community and taking pride in their pizza means. They wanted me to know how much it means to each and every one of them. And I went around and met with literally and got introduced to and met the owner-operators of every single store. A lot of family connections between the stores, a lot of family value within the company itself. But immediately I said to myself, I love that they trust me to spread their word, and I love that I know confidently that when people go in, they're going to see that. They're going to see the quality in the pizza. They're going to see the fact that it's made right there in store, and they're going to see that these are family-owned businesses that are wanting to stay in the community with their money and their give back. And and it goes without saying, the pizza itself, unbelievable, right? Whether you're talking about the traditional pizza, whether you're talking about the thin and crispy, you're talking about fresh pizza, the best ingredients, the very best cheese, the best tomato sauce, all of it. And you can order online, you can do pickup, you can do delivery, chicagospizza.com, or dine in at any of their 18 Indianapolis area locations. There is a story told, their story, in every single slice. It is Indianapolis heritage through and through. So here's what we're going to do. I've got a gift card for $30 to Chicago's Pizza right now if you are the third caller. Uno, dos, tres. Caller number 3 at 239-1070. That's 239-1070. What better way to start your weekend and enjoy the Pacers than with Chicago's Pizza? 239-1070 right now for caller number 3, and we'll get you on your way. Really? Really? We're going here?
Yeah.
Now, is this a mashup mix of the Chipmunks doing the Witch Doctor? Is that what that is?
That is the actual song from the movie.
The original Witch Doctor song, when I was a kid, I had a vinyl LP. It was like a Ronco record set or something for kids, and it was called Funny Bone Music. And it had like goofy songs. And the Witch Doctor was on there. Alley Oop was on there too, which was an awesome song. You ever heard the song Alley Oop? These are like gimmicky novelty songs from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Alley Oop was, I would put on, if you want to know what kind of dork I was, I would go in my bedroom, and I think, I'm assuming kids still have this. I know that kids still have like Nerf basketball hoops, but the original, or at least to my generation, the original Nerf basketball hoop had a little bracket that you put over the door, and then or you could actually like screw it into the door. But I would close my bedroom door and put Alley Oop on the record player, and then do nothing but like throw the Nerf ball in the air and do my own alley-oop dunks for like seemingly hours on end. I can't tell you, I mean, it probably was 20 minutes, but in my mind, it felt like I had a poster on the door of Isaiah Thomas going in for a layup. And so I would have been like 9 or 10 years old. And literally, as I'm talking right now, I cannot be the only person who is confessing to that level of dorkdom in terms of playing. And I mean, obviously, like friends would come over and we'd play, I mean, hours upon hours of horse, around the world, all of it with Nerf basketball. Did you play Nerf basketball, Corbin? Like,
I did.
Did you actually have the Nerf, or did you have, then obviously ultimately they came up with like glass backboards with little like almost like racquetballs and variations of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the traditional Nerf, but literally just the hoop and the little foam ball. Surely they still sell those, right? Because Nerf footballs have changed.
Yeah.
Nerf footballs were, did you have like the original, not the Nerf football with the thing on the like almost propeller thing on the end? Like that's Bush League, man.
The torpedo.
Yeah, the torpedo. Like, yeah, you can't go with that. I'm talking just the original two-paneled, two-color Nerf football. And if you were really smart, you would dunk it in water, get it wet, let it dry out, and then it kind of like hardened a little bit so you could really grip it. But the ultimate like street cred came if you had a Nerf football that had like a chunk of styrofoam missing from it because it had been played with for so long, or like a dog had gotten it at some point, or whatever it might be. The best. And I mean, hours upon hours. Now, the other question is this, Corbin. When you played, so you obviously played with a Nerf football, right?
Yeah.
So when you played backyard football with the guys in the neighborhood or your brother or whoever, did you kick extra points, or was it score to 7?
It was score to 7.
Yeah, no one kicked, right?
Right.
Now, that's probably different now because there are so many soccer players, but we had Josh Simrau's backyard had a line of bushes, and occasionally we would do it where the extra point was you had to kick it over the bushes, but I'm still, that was rare. Usually we simply played to 7, right? You score and it's 7.
Mm-hmm.
I am convinced. I would love to know this mathematical American education fact. I'm not even saying it's correct, but I'm going to state it as fact as if it's correct. I am convinced that amongst males, I don't mean to begrudge the females in the audience, but amongst young boys, that when it came to learning multiplication tables in school, I will guarantee you that the number 7 and the multiplication table of 7 is more quickly learned or already learned by young boys in the United States more than any other number. Because you already knew when you started to learn multiplication, the one thing you knew was 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, 49 because of playing backyard football. You just had it written down. You just knew it. We got 4 touchdowns. Okay, we got 28 points. Now, last one is this. Did you guys blitz?
You had a 5-second count. That you could
Okay, so now here's the thing. So you would blitz, you said, right? So as the defender, did you have to count out loud? And did you go with Mississippi on the count?
Yes.
So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, whatever. But 1 out of every 4 downs, you could bypass having to count that and just yell out blitz and then go.
We didn't play like that.
Okay, so that we had that where exactly that. And so you knew if you got to 4th down, you knew the blitz was coming if they hadn't blitzed yet. Or you could just throw in the curveball and blitz on the 2nd down or whatever and try to get the sack. It is amazing. We'd play, again, theoretically for hours and somehow walk away unscathed. No broken bones, nothing. We were made of rubber back then. Colts draft coming up week, obviously, from yesterday on Thursday, round number 1. It seemed a foregone conclusion. As sure as the fact that the weekend starts tomorrow, as sure as the fact that the Pacers and Bucks have game number 1, as sure as all those facts, it seemed a certainty that the Colts, from the time the season ended, were going to draft a tight end. Now, what I want to know is this. Tyler Warren, I don't think is going to – if they want Tyler Warren, who looks like a Dallas Clark-type tight end, or maybe even a Gronkowski-level tight end, if they want Tyler Warren out of Penn State, who towards the end of the year, especially once you got into the playoffs, you got a chance to really see what he could do, it's okay, this guy's legitimately a great player. But if they want him, then – theoretically, they're going to have to move up in the draft. They're not. He is not going to be available at 14. Now, Colston Loveland is the other tight end in the draft out of Michigan. You've heard us talk a lot about him. Probably maybe is not the yard after catch tight end that is Warren. I don't know, but I think a really good player. Very good option. If Warren is gone but Loveland is available, and the Colts are sitting there at pick number 14. Okay? So I want you to close your eyes and imagine this. Okay? Imagine that the 13th pick is off the board. It's Miami, and they go, let's say defensive back, whatever. And the Colts are now on the clock. And you're watching the coverage and all of that, and you are awaiting to see who the Colts are going to pick, and Loveland's on the board. And you're like, you know what? The best tight end wasn't available to them, but there is still the tight end that's right there. This is a position of huge need for them. The bottom line is there's no doubt about it. They're going to take a tight end. Now, maybe, just maybe they go with defensive back. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, I can kind of live with that. If they go defensive back, whether it be a safety, whether, as Rhett Lewis talked about yesterday, the corner out of Michigan, or maybe because Chris Ballard, I think, favors DBs that have a little more size to them and some good range. Do they go with a safety? Maybe they go that direction. So let's say that you're sitting there, though, and you know that tight end is available. And as you're sitting there thinking about it with tight end, and you're willing to compromise on a defensive back, and then the pick comes in with the 14th pick in the NFL draft, the Indianapolis Colts select Jalen Walker, edge rusher, Georgia. Would you lose your mind if they go again with edge rush or pass rush? Because of the fact that they've done this every single year, seemingly. Liatu Latu a year ago, Kwity Paye a couple years ago. It just feels like the position where, and I get it, you probably can't have enough of those guys. And yes, he's more of a linebacker type edge rusher, which is, kind of the hybrid that we now know of. It's not your days of, your bookend Mathis and Freeney on the edges, and that's it. But one thing I think that we've learned when the Colts keep going back to this, especially if they're trying to get pass rush even moving further back off the line into the linebacker area, is that Chris Ballard, some of the linebackers that he has that have been very productive from a statistic standpoint, maybe that is system-oriented and not player-oriented. Maybe it's because things are funneling to them and they're not going after and getting it, per se. But if they go at, even if it's a great player that is a guy that's going to be a game-changing player, at least in the initial of it, people are going to be completely fatigued by it if they go with edge rusher again, even if it's a great player, just because it's a position that it's going to be like, we're still doing this. We're still doing this. We've talked a lot about Pacers Bucks, but what about the Milwaukee standpoint? What do they think about the Pacers, and is there the same level of concern that I think you get from Indiana's standpoint when looking at Milwaukee? We'll go up to the Beer City. We'll do it in 18. Man, taking me back, Corbin. I mean, I realize I've got to be like one of 12 people that know this song, right? Have you ever heard it?
I have not.
It was just on this Kid album I had as a kid, and I mean, I would literally just alley-oop all day to that song. All day to it. What are the odds, by the way, when we go to Milwaukee here in just a little bit and get the Milwaukee standpoint on things, what are the odds that I can go the entire interview without asking about, like, my favorite haunts from the city of Milwaukee when Justin Garcia joins us, who's the Buck studio host for pre- and post-game for Milwaukee? Like, should I not mention to him that I've done the whole Dahmer tour up there? Would that not go over well?
I don't think that's a part of Milwaukee's history they want to be proud of.
That's Laverne and Shirley. Can I ask about Laverne and Shirley?
Oh, yeah, you can ask about
You think he's
Laverne
been
and
asked
Shirley.
that like 10,000 times?
I would probably say 9,999. But
The Pabst Mansion, I mean, they're probably cool with that, right? Or the brew house where I stay.
Mm-hmm.
The best place. I'm telling you, I love Milwaukee. I do. I love it. I just I don't want the Pacers to have to play more than 2 games up there. Let's put it that way. But we'll talk to Justin coming up here just about 15 minutes from now and get the lowdown on how the Bucks see things in terms of the playoffs. Talking earlier, by the way, when Casey said he was taking his boys to the Pacer game instead of buying them cologne, this from my buddy Bruce. Jake, you need to check out True Fit and Hill True Fit and Hill line of colognes, a UK-based company. I hope that doesn't mean Kentucky. My favorite line. All right, I'll check it out. Bond number 9 is always has kind of been my go-to, and Tom Ford is really good too. Dolce & Gabbana has a really good one that I like. Not to completely geek out on colognes here, but I do definitely enjoy, if you will. Hey, Jake, Cool Water was my first cologne. Yeah, I get that. Most people's first cologne, I would say, is probably Cool Water, or if you're of my era, the Polo Green bottle. The Polo Green bottle, by the way, somebody broke it in Spanish class when I was in high school, and everybody was sick for like 2 weeks. Jovan Musk for my dad got me started, says Jason. Yeah, I'm with you there, man. I'm with you. Can you fire up alley-oop a little bit more here? Somebody said the alley-oop reentry is awesome. Can you go? I don't know how long we can play songs before we get flagged for like some sort of violation here. There we go. All right, Todd said we can't. I think we can play up to like 15 seconds, can't we? Can we not? Okay. Anyway, great song. Okay, so the transfer portal today, and this is now we've shifted from, it appears as though with the transfer portal news, we've hit like a calm down with the basketball side of it, but now the football side of it, the transfer portal's like running amok, right? Seemingly everybody now is losing a quarterback or gaining a quarterback. North Carolina was apparently the one that was going to spend $4 million to get Nico from Tennessee. Now apparently he's going to UCLA. North Carolina goes with a quarterback instead from, I think, South Alabama. Is that right? Notre Dame loses a quarterback to the transfer portal. I think Purdue just lost, did they not, Corbin, a quarterback to the transfer portal, yes. Right? This is the thing about all of this that I think needs to come with almost like a disclaimer for young people. And I get it. Again, I'm going to keep going back to I get it. But you wonder how many of these players are going somewhere because of what they believe is a greener pasture. And then they get there and realize that the recruiting game, they've been duped all over again. You know, they go to it and, now know, okay, wait a minute. I thought because you were giving me $150,000 to come as the quarterback that means I'm the starter. Well, no, we actually have a sophomore that played really well in offseason, and now, boom, you go there and you're back to square one. The other thing that I think you're going to see happening, and this already you see this, there are only so many spots available, and you get some players that throw their name in the transfer portal And then you find out that when you break up with somebody and you realize that, like, the other person that you were thinking about giving a call to doesn't want to go out with you, and you go back to the original and you're like, you know what, I know that I said that I wanted to break up, but do you want to try to work things out? And they're like, no, actually, I'm seeing somebody else now. The number of players that go into the transfer portal and then end up not finding a place to stay and not finding a place to land and they try to go back to their original school and find out either A, that school has filled the void, or B, the school's moved on. Sorry, man, you said you want to see other people. That's the one, and I guess that, again, I'm going to go back to. If college is about preparing you for the real world, the reality is in the real world, there are people all the time that within your employment or whatever it may be, that if you make the wrong decision or you opt for the wrong thing, you can find yourself on the outside looking in and wondering what happened. And maybe in that regard, it's lesson learned, but that's a tough lesson to learn. But I think that I am all for young players, young people being able to use the transfer portal to kind of better their lot in life, whether it be financially or just situationally or even with opportunity, playing wise, whatever else. That's all well and good. But a very important aspect, having nothing to do with the college curriculum, a very important aspect of life in general between the ages of 18 to 22. I don't care whether you're an athlete. I don't care whether you're in the military. I don't care whether you go right into the workforce, whatever it might be. But you have been operating your entire life, for the most part, on a treadmill where everybody's moving at the same pace. And every August it resets itself. Or whatever now with year-round school, whenever school starts. But you could be the smartest kid in your class, you could be the slowest kid in your class, but come August, everybody starts right back at the same starting line on the same treadmill. That's the way life works until like the age of 18. Then when you go out into the quote-unquote real world, you realize that it works and operates and flows at different paces for different people, and it's about finding out your pace and how you mesh and blend in. And going through adversity and working your way through adverse situations and learning from mistakes and learning from inopportune scenarios and figuring out how to make them opportunistic, those things are what being a young person between the ages of 18 and 22 or 23 is all about, regardless of whichever avenue you're going about doing it. And I think the one thing that the transfer portal could do is it's offering a disservice. While I understand it, and I understand the mentality for young people to want to take advantage of it, the one thing that I think where it can be a hindrance is it gives people a bailout from when the going gets tough. You lost your starting job. You may lose your scholarship. You have a new coach that doesn't necessarily like the way that you defend at this end of the court, whatever it might be. In the real world, you have to figure out how to adjust to those things and either, find a better situation, I guess, or adjust yourself and compromise and come to a happy medium with it in the real world. But in the college world with the transfer portal now, the one thing that gives me pause or that concerns me is the number of players that are going to say, yeah, you know what? I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm just going to transfer. And then they go to another school, and, well, this coach is different than what I thought he was going to be, so I'm going to transfer again. And it should not be utilized as a safety bailout. You want to do it and try to get more money? Sure. You want to get it to because you think that you have a better chance of getting reps? I understand it. But if you're doing it just to avoid having to be in uncomfortable or trying or challenging positions, then in that case, it has erred. And I think you're going to see a ton more like that. Jake, I think it cuts the other way as well. It gives coaches the opportunity to give up on a kid quicker, knowing that kid is going to hit the portal as quickly as possible. Very true. And also, it might cause coaches to give up on a player quickly because they know how easily they're replaced. Look, I can work with this guy or gal and make them a better, and work on their tennis serve, work on their quarterback footwork, work on their point guard defensive play, whatever it might be. Or I can jettison them on about their way, tell them they're better off going somewhere else, and get the kid from State U that's right down the street that I saw on film that I know is in the portal, right? Speaking going to State U, we're going to go up 65, then around Chicago 294. We're going to time it right so we don't hit traffic. We're going to count the number of firework billboards and Brian Urlacher hair replacement billboards. Then we're going to get up into Wisconsin. We're not going to stop at the Mars Cheese Castle, but we are going to stop in Milwaukee. And we're going to talk with Justin Garcia, who's the Bucs studio host pre- and post-game, and break down the series of the Pacers and the Bucs next. This is the favorite song, according to Corbin, of Milwaukee Buck legend and Indianapolis native Oscar Robertson, correct?
That is correct.
And you learned that tidbit where? That's impressive.
NPR.
They just one day played it and said that's the favorite song of Oscar Robertson?
They interviewed him on what his favorite music is.
Okay, fair enough. It's interesting when you think about, and we're going to try to get a hold of Justin here in Milwaukee and get the Bucks perspective on it. If you go with all-time Buck legends, I mean, when I think of the Milwaukee Bucks, I still go back to and think of the Mecca and those days of even like the Scott Skiles era. I mean, a lot of that is just age bias, right? But in terms of great Bucks legends, and I don't even know if you were to look at and ask people in Milwaukee. I mean, Giannis is clearly, I mean, I know he's not number one, but he's got to be close. I mean, he delivered them an NBA title in an unbelievably historic fashion in terms of what he was able to do to seal it. But at the same time, and it's funny because, Lou Alcindor, Kareem, he did so much as a Laker that you forget, I hate to say forget, but you kind of overlook the fact that he was also a Milwaukee Buck, although in Milwaukee they wouldn't forget that. And then Oscar obviously pairing up with him and those two winning a title. But Giannis he's got to be third, right? Way up there. I mean, Sidney Moncrief, Eddie Johnson was a good player. Justin Garcia joins us now on the guest line. He is the Bucks studio host for pre- and post-game to talk about this. Justin, let's get right to it, and I certainly appreciate the time. I know it's got to be a busy time for you. From an Indiana standpoint, there is great cause for concern, obviously, when you're dealing with Giannis because he is I believe, top 3 player. I think he might be the best player in the NBA right now. What about Indiana gives concern from the Milwaukee standpoint?
I think the pace that they play at would be the big one. I mean, it's funny how granted having Giannis available is a big boost for the Bucks, but it's night and day the feeling within the organization and certainly the fan base a year ago versus going into the playoffs this year that you got Giannis, you feel like, and it's not just Indiana who has a good solution to slowing him down, but for the Bucks, as we saw last year, that pace that the Pacers can push things at, that's the big concern. Now, the Bucks are positioned much better with a lot of the roster overturn they've had, but we've still seen teams have the ability to run on the Bucks even after makes this season.
Okay, obviously a year ago, and you know this, Justin, the Giannis's availability was the game-by-game question mark of the series. Now it is Damian Lillard, who is, and I want to make very clear, Justin, that, and I think everybody in Indianapolis knows this as well, the health of any player, and Damian Lillard is a special talent. Obviously, everybody wants to make sure that from a health standpoint that he is healthy when it comes to blood clots, which are very serious. But then that raises the question of his availability here in the series itself. Looks like his health is trending in the right direction. Does that mean we will see him in this series?
Yeah, I think he's going to play in game 2 of the series. He's already been ruled out for game 1. I think last year, and I do feel like the Pacers probably felt this way too. We all kind of knew Giannis wasn't playing. I think everybody that saw soleus strain, you went to look that up and saw the previous instances. It was largely gamesmanship. I mean, even as we learned after the season ended, there was no chance Giannis was going to play if it went even into the second round if the Bucks reached that. So I do think Rick Carlisle and his staff probably assumed that. In the case of Dame, he's been cleared. He was practicing with the team yesterday. He's already off the blood thinning medication. The organization from the onset was incredibly optimistic he was going to return this season. Everything that I had heard from people in the group was confidence. He's going to play. And I just assumed that was not going to be the case because this is blood clots we're dealing with. But they caught it early in that he popped up on the injury report with a calf strain. And all the symptoms he was relaying to the medical staff, they went through, they did scans and just said, look, this isn't tracking with a calf strain. This is something else. I don't know how much of that was, top of mind with Victor Wembanyama suffering deep vein thrombosis weeks earlier or what. But they caught this early through that, recognizing this is not a calf strain. This is something else. And he started on the blood thinners basically from the moment he appeared on the injury report. And it wasn't until about a week later that we learned it was a blood clot.
When you look, Justin, at what Milwaukee did in his absence, Giannis and his ability to facilitate and kind of run point forward, as we talked about on the show earlier, has been very impressive and clearly has been a difference maker in facilitating for some of their shooters. A.J. Green is one that doesn't need a lot of time to knock down a shot for them. But if Lillard is back into the lineup, it alters things that Milwaukee has done well down the home stretch. In what way?
Well, I mean, it basically alters everything. And I think that's the interesting part is I said I expect him to play game 2. I think he's going to be on a decent minutes restriction. It's not going to be until later in the series you see more of that, which kind of allows you to lean into what you've been doing for this past month or so with Giannis playing point guard. And that's the big adjustment is you found what works, that Giannis is the guy that can probe and penetrate, get into the lane. He's gotten better and better throughout the year at that mid-range jumper. And he's found shooters, and that's another credit to the Bucks and how they've overhauled the roster with more trusted shooters out there. That's what's worked. It's tougher to pressure Giannis, too. We've seen teams pick up Dame full length of the floor. The Pacers did that in the series last year. So that's the big thing I think you have to lean into, and that's something that you can if you're just kind of working Damian Lillard into the mix and allow him to play off the ball more.
If you were to put truth serum in Doc Rivers and say, okay, Doc, you can pick one player that you want to erase any doubt about them and get their best series out of them. Now, obviously, Giannis, so I'm not talking Giannis or Damian Lillard. The player that is the most important for Milwaukee that is not necessarily a frontline central player for them in this particular matchup that they really need consistency out of is who?
So there's a couple of ways you could go with it. I mean, I think Bobby Portis is pretty big for the Bucks because we've seen other teams attack Brook Lopez, who I think has been very good this season, but the matchup, and we saw it last year, of getting them in a pick and roll. The Bucks need more versatility. That's another thing they've leaned into with Giannis playing center down the stretch. That only works if Bobby Portis is hitting shots and at least holding up defensively. But the biggest one, which I don't know anybody that would have predicted this weeks ago, is probably Kevin Porter Jr. because he's been incredible for the Bucks the last month of the season. He has carried their bench units. He's been a closer for the Bucks, and it's been on both ends of the floor. And that's where a lot of the Bucks' issues lied in this matchup a year ago. Not just Tyrese Halliburton, anybody they couldn't contain at the point of attack. And Kevin Porter Jr. has done that with his quickness and size, and he's given them a nice mix of mid-range offense and attacking the basket too. So I think he's all of a sudden become one of the more important players on this roster.
Rick Carlisle's talked a lot about the fact that he believes that one of the keys for Indiana, Justin Garcia, our guest, Buck Studio host, that he believes Rick Carlisle does one of the keys for Indiana is their transition defense. Milwaukee likes to how often get things going in transition, or are they more if it's not Giannis taking it to the basket, back up and then go into half-court set?
It's increased since the trade deadline because Kyle Kuzma has done that, and that's kind of been one of the clunkier fits offensively for the Bucks. Is he plays a similar style to Giannis, minus some of the efficiencies there, but he's a guy that can get it out and push it in transition. Kevin Porter Jr., another one too. So they've really started to pick up their transition game. The way the roster was assembled last year, it wasn't as much. As you mentioned, it was pretty much just Giannis. Damian Lillard plays at a slower pace. The rest of the guards the Bucks had, Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, those are guys that are going to play at a slower pace. So it has increased since the trade deadline. It's still not among, tops in the league and teams that are going to look to get out and run the most frequently.
Who is the Bucks rival? If you were to ask, if you were to survey Bucks fans, hey, what team do you like the least? Who are we going with?
Right now, it's the Indiana Pacers. I mean, if you asked me this 2 years ago, it would probably be the Miami Heat. But it's a conversation we've had around these parts too. The Bucks haven't really had a rival for quite some time. We've tried to fit in the Heat because of repeated playoff matchups, the Celtics for a lesser extent as well. But it wasn't really until last year that you saw this matchup and you saw there's a clear dislike here on both sides that it just fitted. This is the rival.
Now, here's the thing. Pacer fans would tell you, and I think the Pacers are interesting because historically speaking, it would be the Knicks, right? But the Bucks are kind of there too because they were back when there truly still were divisions. You know, the Central Division. I think the Pacers and Bucks both in the late '80s kind of enjoyed a resurgence at the same or a rise at the same time. So I get it. Bobby Portis and then last year Patrick Beverley. I mean, those guys are antagonists, right? That's just their style. That's what they do. Who is a Pacers antagonist? Who's the player on the Pacers roster that Bucks fans love to hate?
There's nobody that's even a close second. It's Tyrese Halliburton, the hometown kid. He has drawn the ire of Bucks fans more than anyone the past couple of years.
And that's a compliment to him, right? Because he hits the three and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I think there was.
You can say it, Justin. Come on, we're trying.
Well, I think it was initially the hey, good for this guy, a Oshkosh native, about 90 minutes away from Milwaukee. We'll root for him. Then he gets traded to the Pacers. His dad comes to he's there in Indy too, but he comes to every game in Milwaukee and is very vocal. The Dame Time celebration in the NBA Cup. I mean, all of it has just kind of led to this is the number one target for Bucks fans.
I like it though, man. It's fun though, right? I mean, it's part of the fun of it all. Include, Bobby Portis as well, right? Like it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm a big fan of professional wrestling, and I know Tyrese is too. And that's the vibe that you get of the personality and everything else.
Okay, how about this one, Justin? We were talking about this just before we had you on. Justin Garcia, our guest. I'm going to try to guess the top 5 most beloved Bucks of all time, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with Kareem. I'm going to go with Oscar Robertson. I'll go Giannis. I'm going to go Sidney Moncrief, and then I'm going to go curveball here with the last one and go Jack Sikma. Wasn't he a Buck?
Yeah. Jack Sikma was a Buck. So Giannis is number one, far and away. I know the debate over who's the greatest player in franchise history, both he and Kareem have a championship. They're both all-time great players. Kareem played in 2 finals. But the exit, I think, still had or has a lot of Bucks fans not fully on board. It's changed, and there's been a repairing of the relationship through the years. But Giannis is clearly number one. Kareem I'd still put up there for most beloved. Chris Middleton is in the top 5.
Really?
Too,
okay,
that's
made cool.
That trade at the deadline all that more difficult. Marcus Johnson, who does their games on TV, is up there as well. And, for the last one, it's kind of gone a revolving door of players. Like Ray Allen is still pretty beloved.
Yeah,
by the fan
that makes
base,
sense.
Even though the exit wasn't great. So I would say most fans would probably fall with Ray Allen, but you have a revolving list of guys who weren't necessarily great players or franchise icons that you can make a strong case for. I mean, Brandon Jennings still popped up at Bucks games and has this appeal among Bucks fans, and he didn't have all that long of a tenure here.
So would Oscar not be up there just because it was end of career for him and it was so long ago?
Yeah. I think it was because it was end of career and it wasn't very long either.
Right.
It was 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, Sikma. I mean, I think of Sikma almost more as a Sonic, but for whatever reason, I think of him as a Buck. Now, here's Marcus Johnson's claim to fame, Justin. I've always thought this is the nut. Like I don't know if you work with Marcus Johnson or if you're around him at all, but you can just tell him this. This would be the top thing on my LinkedIn if I'm Marcus Johnson. In 1983 or 4, I think it was 84, in the College Basketball Sports Illustrated preview issue, and their feature on Michael Jordan, they showed Michael Jordan in his dorm room, and he had Marcus Johnson's poster on his wall.
Yeah, we've all brought that up to Marcus through the years of, when you got Michael Jordan idolizing you, you've done something.
Hey, what are you going to look for tomorrow early in the game that is going to tell you whether or not it is a game that is going to go the Bucs' way or not?
I think the pace is a big one. And here's the interesting thing. The Bucs, with Giannis playing the point guard, they've found an incredible amount of efficiency offensively. They had a game where they had the highest field goal percentage the league had seen in nearly 30 years in a single game. Just a couple of games ago to close things out, they're routinely shooting in the mid-50s with an effective field goal percentage approaching 60% for the past couple of weeks of the season. It's harder to run. I know you can run on makes, but it's harder to do it when you're constantly taking the ball out of the net. So if the Pacers are able to get out and run, that's going to be something that's not great for the Bucs. And the other thing is turnovers. By the numbers, the Bucs are not bad at turning the ball over offensively. I think if you ask Bucs fans, they would think they're in the bottom 5 in the league, because when they do, it comes in bunches, and it's the story of the game. And playing a Pacers team with Tyrese Halliburton, who does not turn over the ball, the Bucs have run into a lot of problems this year when they're not rebounding and when they're losing the shot battle. And they got turnovers and offensive rebounds they're giving up, and the opponent is taking more shots. So if that's the case, they're going to be in trouble.
You know, I'm going to give you permission here to completely mock me for this question, okay? Damian Lillard is a phenomenal talent. And in particular, you know, this year, I remember there was a game where he didn't have a great scoring output game, and then the Pacers, I think, put him on the line once or twice, and you could see where he got the feel, and then all of a sudden he started feeling it. I'm like, you cannot let this guy get hot because he's a lightning in a bottle guy. But I wonder if, not watching them game in and game out when Damian Lillard was healthy, am I going a little too much off the reputation of what he was for so long in Portland, or does he still have that in him? Or are we seeing later career Damian Lillard that does not have the lightning in a bottle with the frequency with which we were used to?
So are you suggesting they're better off without Dame?
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that at all.
Okay,
I mean,
because that has been a popular suggestion by Bucs fans with the way that they closed.
I get it. They did play well, Justin, down the stretch, right? For sure. But I don't think I think it would be naive to dismiss the talent that he brings. Now, there might be a reacclimation period, though, right?
Right. Yep. That's what I would expect. And, you know, to your question, look, he has certainly transitioned to the downswing of his career, but he was very effective and efficient this season. I mean, I think it gets lost in the shuffle. He had a really good season by the numbers. His efficiency numbers were right up there among his career best. He wasn't bad last year. It just wasn't, you know, I think what a lot of Bucs fans expected. And there was a year-long feeling out process between he and Giannis to see how does this fit here. But this season he was really good. And, you know, I think the one thing the Bucs may have found that's going to be the most important is there was that not necessarily your turn, my turn type of vibe with he and Giannis, but you could tell they were still trying to figure out, okay, when should I take over? When should you take over? Should I defer here? And that's a tough adjustment for Dame, who was Giannis in Portland. But I think what the Bucs have kind of seen here is, look, this is what works. So if it means you're one of the better or best second options in the league, fine. But it's no longer 1A and 1B. It's Giannis is the one, and then you're next. Before
we let you run here, Justin, I do want to go back to one thing that you mentioned earlier, because I've always been kind of intrigued by Kyle Kuzma. And here's a term that I came up with, and feel free to use this because I haven't trademarked it yet, okay, so you can use this. A couple of years ago, I came up with the term a 2025 guy. Now, Justin, a 2025 guy, this is a Jake Queryism, a 2025 guy is a guy that seemingly is a 20-point-per-game scorer on a 25-win team for the totality of his career, okay? Bradley Beal is starting to feel like maybe he's a 2025 guy, right? Ricky Davis is the poster child, or Larry Hughes. Those two guys are the poster children of 2025 guys. Kuzma, I know, has talent, but he's bounced around a couple of places where I wonder if that's not really kind of what he is. And clearly Milwaukee saw something in him, but I'm curious as to how he has meshed and blended in, or whether or not he still is kind of like that tennis ball that got into the washing machine and is bouncing all over the place. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was 20-20 as in the field goal and 3-point percentage, because that's not too far off of what we've seen from Kyle Kuzma since coming to the Bucks. I think there's something there. I mean, I think his value is defense, and the offense has been a clunky fit. I would agree with your notion that he has the skill set that he's going to score points on a bad team, but playing as more of a secondary guy, it's been an adjustment for Kyle and for the coaching staff. Doc Rivers has talked about it quite a bit too, in that we're trying to find the right way to work Kyle in. That by the numbers, he's not a great shooter, and that's kind of what you need on the floor with Giannis. He's a guy that's going to get out and run. He can take it the length of the floor and finish in transition. But again, that's what Giannis does. So that's been the clunky fit on the offensive side. And, I don't know if there's any resolution there before the end of the season, but what has helped the Bucks immensely has been Kyle Kuzma's defense. It has been leaps and bounds better than any of us imagined it could be. That oftentimes he's taking on one of the tougher assignments. He'll take, 1 through 5 at times defensively. He's very heavily taking on guards in the backcourt, which has especially helped them out in those games with Damian Lillard. So they found a value there, but he's one of those guys that I don't know if I'd say he's the X factor, but it does feel like, okay, if Kyle Kuzma is hitting shots and gives you a big game offensively, that seems like a game the Bucks are going to win because of everything else you're getting from, assumingly, Giannis and Dame and the rest of the role players and the defense of Kyle Kuzma. So there's a lot of hope those last couple of games of the season. He only played the first quarter of that final game against the Pistons, but scored 22 points in the quarter. But there's a lot of hope of, all right, he shot the ball much better the past couple of games. Hopefully this is momentum going into the playoffs.
What way, if any, have you seen that people are able to guard Giannis and I mean, not stop him, but at least contain him a little bit? Are you better off just fronting him? Do you have to be physical with him? Do you play off of him so he can't drive and then force him to pull up? What does, if anything, work?
You just have to give him different looks, because if you do one thing, he's going to, he's meticulous and he studies as much as anyone. He's going to go in there and see how you're attacking him and change it up. Those were the defenses that gave him the most problems earlier in his career. When you think about what Nick Nurse did with the Raptors and certainly Eric Spoelstra, that if you keep throwing different looks at him, that's what's going to confuse him the most. But, the other part in terms of like an individual player type is if you got a guard that is stout and physical and can move his feet quickly, those are the guys, more so than length, that have kind of frustrated Giannis the most.
Now, do you do, and I know obviously, Justin, that you do the work with the Bucks Radio. Do you also do a talk show up there?
I do a post-game show. I do another podcast, and then I do work on a game broadcast, yeah.
Okay, so here's why I mention it. Even though this is, to your point, two teams that are kind of rivals, especially of late, there's history there, even though they're in the playoffs right now, and I know how badly people want to see Indiana advance past Milwaukee. I do have some love for the city of Milwaukee. I think it's a great city. I'm a fan of PBR. I'm allowing you, if you'd like, to use the 2025 term occasionally. You don't have to credit me if you don't want to. It'd be nice, but it's not trademarked, so you can freely use it. But deep down, will you at least give me this much? At some point, you're going to say, that's actually not a bad term.
I don't think anybody in Milwaukee is listening, so I'll sign off on it here in terms of using it on the game podcast. I don't think I can do that, but I'll give you the credit here.
Well, here's the thing. You don't have to use it in return in regards to a Bucks player per se. But if you're talking about within, like Bradley Beal, you can say, he's kind of a 2025 guy. Then explain what it is, and then you can take the intellectual credit if need be.
Yeah, I might tweak it a little bit to like a 25-30 guy.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
But
yeah.
I like the gist of it. You found something there.
In Bradley Beal's case now, it's actually he's more of a 14-30 guy, right? There's a sliding scale. Yes, I get it, right?
Yeah.
I get it.
That's a 1035 for Bradley Beal.
That's
like
exactly right.
Like a tax form you're filling out.
That's exactly right. Justin, I appreciate it. Busy time, I realize. Certainly enjoy the weekend and the series as well. And maybe, might talk again over the course of the series, depending how long this goes and what exactly happens with it. Appreciate the time.
Well, I expect it to go long. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it could well go 7, to be honest with you. I hope Damian Lillard is able to play because you want to see, the stars in the playoffs, right? And yes, I do think 6 or 7 is matter of fact, I'd be stunned if it didn't go 6 or 7, right?
And I'm assuming you're taking the Pacers in 6 or 7.
You know what? I think I will tell you this, if Giannis is able to play the way that he was able to play down the home stretch that secured for them the distance in front of Detroit that got them to 5, and they were the Halliburton 3 away from being the 4, it would not surprise me if Milwaukee wins it in 6 or 7. Would not surprise me.
I think we're in for a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to him, right? He's the best right now. I personally believe right now that Giannis is playing the best basketball on the planet, and Jokic is fabulous, and Doncic is fabulous, and and obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is fantastic. But in terms of the multi-dimensions that Giannis brings, I think he is a real tiger by the tail. So we'll see.
The best player in conference, yeah.
Yeah,
That's what you hang your head on if you're the Bucks.
Yeah, you're exactly right. All right, Justin, we appreciate it.
All right, see you guys.
Justin Garcia joining us, talking about the Bucks and the Pacers. I should have asked him. It sounds like he also agrees that it could go Milwaukee in 7, but I think it'll be a great series. I think it'll be a really, really fun, entertaining, and if the Pacers do win it, I like their chances against, say, Cleveland in round 2, but I just think this matchup is a challenge. The Pacers might be the better team 2 through 5, but I think the matchup is a real challenge for them. Either way, though, it's a Friday. That means it is a good news Friday, a feel-good, good for the heart Friday from Franciscan Health. And I will tell you about a group that, despite probably some things going against them, is saying, you know what, we're going to rally together and we're going to win together. And I love the story, partially because it has a little bit to do with my roots. I'll tell you about it next. It's a Friday, 2:30. You know what that means. And I am so happy to be able to get the word out about the fine folks at Franciscan Health and the work that they're doing to not only educate people about cardiovascular health, but also, potentially saving people. I mean, I mentioned to you guys, gals, I was at the Pacer game last week. I'm trying to think of who they were even playing when I was at the game. Might have been it was the penultimate regular season home game. But at any rate, I'm sitting in nice couple sitting next to me from the area, and we're probably halfway through the second quarter, and finally he says, hey, listen, I don't mean to interrupt your game here, but I wanted to tell you something. I said, yeah, what's that? I thought he was going to say, can you move over, or, grab a Coke or whatever. And he says, I got a heart scan a little while ago and found out that I have, very shortly thereafter getting my heart scan, I went into AFib and didn't realize the score was what it was. And I want to thank you for that, because it was when I was listening to you on the radio and I heard you talking about the heart scans from Franciscan Health that are just $49. You can do it out of pocket. You can self-refer. You get a heart health risk assessment with it. And he said, I'm on the medication now and I'm on top of it and seeing the doctors there because of the fact that I went in and got a heart scan and found out that I was at risk. And without the heart scan, probably wouldn't have even known that and would not have known that that there was a situation there. And not long after that, I mean, probably 3 days later, I got a text from a listener, Chris, really nice guy who I've met once in public. He also said, hey, I had a scan and I was shocked at the result and terrified of it. But, now I'm getting in and I'm getting seen and going to get on the medications that are necessary to limit my risk of a heart attack or a heart issue. And all of that from a $49 heart scan. And listen, it as I say all the time, and you'll hear me apologize for it. I know it's a sports talk show and you want to hear sports, but I do think it's important to get that message out. And if we can get through to one person, then that's the goal. And each one is as important as the next and the one before. And to know that a couple of them came up to me in the last week, truly appreciate it. Last night, somebody said something to me at the Can when I was doing the thing for the IMS film at the Can. Really nice guy came up to me and said that he appreciated us talking about blood clots because he too's on blood thinners. So even in the world of sports, it's been a topic, obviously, with Damian Lillard. But each and every Friday, I try to find a story that just over the course of the week that I read or hear about that's uplifting. And, there's so much negativity in sport, and we talk all the time about transfer portals and kids leaving and free agency and money and, all the things that kind of wear you out, to be honest with you. And I would love to know if you know of a story, and the real goal here is each and every week, particularly high school kids, but, we've featured a lot of fun things on the program. And if you know of somebody who has overcome the odds or somebody who has utilized or found sport in giving them a belief in themselves or letting them fit in with a new school or somebody that's overcome the odds, I would love to feature them on this segment each and every Friday that we do. And that includes talking about a story that I saw in the Indianapolis Star. So kudos to the Indianapolis Star for this story that I saw last week is when I was reading it. But it caught my eye because, as I've mentioned before, when I was a kid, before we moved to Indianapolis, my parents are both natives of Indianapolis, but my dad was in the steel business and worked for Shelby Steel, which later became O'Neill Steel, out of Shelbyville. And O'Neill's out of Birmingham, but he worked out of the office in Shelbyville. So I lived essentially the first 5.5 years of my life in Shelbyville, which is weird. I have this photographic level memory of all of my memories of living in Shelbyville. Country Club Heights, by the way. Spent a lot of time at the Elks Club and still know a lot of people in Shelbyville. And during COVID, one day, when the world was on lockdown, I was stir crazy like everybody else, and I decided I'm just going to get in my car and go for a drive and go drive through my old neighborhood in Shelbyville and go drive around Shelbyville. And things have changed, obviously, a lot since my family, for example, moved right before I started kindergarten. Shelbyville's not the same place it was in the late 70s, obviously. What town is? But like a lot of towns in Indiana, Shelby Steel is still there. But one of the larger factories that Shelbyville had at the time is no longer there, and the population of Shelbyville has really taken a hit. And life isn't necessarily easy in rural America, in small town America, for a number of different factors, in particular when comparing it to 40, 50 years ago. And I've gone and spoken to the kids at Shelbyville High School. I've been in Shelbyville High School in the last couple of years and have a lot of love for there, but I can also see amongst the young people there that sometimes when you look around and you live in a world where you feel like the world doesn't believe in your surroundings, then you wonder why you should and why you should believe in yourself. And I think that strikes a lot of kids in the small towns around Indiana, and notably Shelbyville, Indiana, whose population has decreased. The school itself, which was, you're talking about a school whose basketball gymnasium is named for the first African-American player in Big Ten history, and Bill Garrett. So there's and it's a very cool basketball arena. There's a lot of great athletic history at Shelbyville. 79 semi-state. I mean, they've had some big-time teams come out of there, but not as much anymore. And a lot of that is because of the decline in population. Nick Blakely is a guy that saw this, had a passion for track and field, and decided that he wanted to make the difference of giving kids in Shelbyville a reason to believe and a purpose and a pride in being from where they're from. Not in looking to get out, but in making the most of the situation that they're in. And at a school where now there's just over 1,000 students, was a lot more than that at one time, and those numbers are decreasing each year. And in most sports, the numbers are decreasing. But what Nick has done is gone around and through showing dedication, he's seen in the last 11 years that he's been the track coach at Shelbyville High School, the numbers increase. We're now close to 100 kids that are running within the track program at Shelbyville, and at one time that was like 60. And why is it that kids are coming out and running track, which obviously has its own benefit just in terms of the health standpoint of it and, the camaraderie and teamwork of it. But more so, I think we overlook and forget the importance for young people of them seeing, and I'm not saying every kid that runs track at Shelbyville is coming from like a bad background. Don't misquote me here or misunderstand. But I do know that in towns like that, a lot of those kids feel that their community's overlooked and that their school is overlooked. And to have somebody come in who himself is a track runner that is spending, 48 weekends a year away from home because he is putting together track meets or himself running in track meets, but is going to the kids in the school and saying, why don't you come run track? It's not a matter of whether or not we're winning events. It's not a matter of whether or not you're the fastest 4x400 relay runner in the school. It's a matter of the fact that you're representing your school and you're putting effort into something because I believe in your ability to represent this school and for us to represent Shelbyville the right way because I believe in Shelbyville. And I think young people need to hear the word believe. And so now when student athletes at Shelbyville are not making the tennis team or not making the softball team, they're not giving up their athletic dreams or their team dreams because Nick is opening up with welcoming arms them into the track program and finding a place for them to run, which I think is fabulous. And I think when you go and you watch and you see what they're doing, you can see the benefit, not necessarily of accumulating trophies, but of accumulating self-confidence and the understanding and the grasp that even when your town maybe is up against it a little bit, you can rise above that and be proud of where you're from. And I've always been proud of the fact that I lived as a kid in Shelbyville, and I love and thank Nick for giving opportunity for the Golden Bears of today to be able to have belief in who and what they are. Love it. And it goes without saying that they're getting great exercise. You can as well and continue to do so by simply starting out with the cardiovascular health of a heart scan, $49. Very easy to do from Franciscan Health. 833-238-0688 is the telephone number. I know you're not going to remember 833-238-0688. So you can simply Google, of course, heart screening or heart scans from Franciscan Health, or find more information at franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. That's franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. Now, this could get interesting. The Australians are coming in for the playoffs. Michael and Marcus, who you've gotten to know on this program, they're the Australians that I met at the Pacer game like 5 years ago. I think they've been to more games in the last 3 years than probably I have. I mean, it's amazing. They come over a lot, which I love them. I mean, they're like family to me at this point. But Michael sent me this. Good morning, sir. We are in Los Angeles. This from right when we went on the air today. We have a 10 a.m. flight to Indy, so he should be landing probably in about an hour. But here's the thing. I have an hour to go before we take off, but on the 14-and-a-half-hour flight on the way over, I have not yet slept. That's not good. But we could do dinner tonight. Now, so that would mean that they will have landed, and he hasn't slept like since I think it was in the early morning when they took off, so he hasn't slept in like a day and a half, and then they're going to go right to the game tomorrow. That would appear to be a fairly tough jet lag to make up. But what's the longest? J&V has walked in. John, what's the longest flight you've ever been on?
Longest and worst was from Houston, Texas to Anchorage, Alaska.
Boy, that's good. Now, wait a minute.
And that was even longer. Now, I went to London. That was longer than London. Seriously, it was quicker to get to London than
I believe that. So, wait a minute. What did you do in Anchorage?
2014, it was an Alaskan cruise, and to save money, evidently, I got booked to go from here to Houston, and then I got to sit between two frat douchebags that drank vodka and crayons and spilled one on my leg. And then the worst part about it was I went to some Cajun place in the airport in Houston, and probably before we hit the Canadian Rockies, I was about ready just to befoul the entire plane.
I flew once. I'll tell you what was a long flight, man. I flew once same thing. I went to Edmonton for an IndyCar event, and I guess it was less expensive for them to fly us conveniently through Phoenix.
Yeah.
Phoenix to Edmonton was a haul, man, because Edmonton's it's not as far up as Anchorage. Alaska, so I've done the Alaskan cruise also. Alaska is absolutely stunning. I love it. I was once on a flight, speaking of sitting between like frat boy D-bags, a couple of years ago, I was on a flight into Fort Lauderdale, and I was sitting around like four different dudes that were all on spring break, and they were getting after it on the plane, which is, all well and good, whatever. But as we were landing, one of them realized that they actually were supposed to be flying into Fort Myers, but they had booked it for Fort Lauderdale. And then they were trying to figure out, so they decided they were going to try to Uber it from Fort Lauderdale to Fort Myers. And I'm thinking, man, on a college budget, that would not be fun.
That's rough right there, man. But no, that was – because when I went to London, I went with Bullseye, and they leased a plane that took off from here and landed in London.
Nice.
It was awesome.
Yeah. And that's still a long flight, though. But, yes.
Yeah, but it didn't feel like it at all. When I went from Houston to Anchorage, it was awful. Absolutely. I hated every second of it.
What is the Houston to Anchorage flight time? I'm going to guess that's got to be – I'm going to guess, man, I don't know.
There were Canadian – There were fires in Canada and the Rockies, and you could see the planes, putting down the flame retardant stuff.
I'm going to say I'm going to guess a 9-hour flight. 8.5, I'll guess. 8.5. 9 hours and 9 minutes. Wow, yeah. That's a haul,
It's
man.
awful.
That's
it
a haul.
was terrible.
You know what was not awful was your show yesterday. Did you have fun out and about?
Had a great time with Thomas, Premier Weight Loss. Got some people in there on that in-body scan. Have you ever done the in-body scan?
No, you get your BMI and everything, right?
Yeah, you get everything in there, man. You do. And it will tell you exactly what's going on.
I need to go in because there's, heart health in that as well, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. Well, I mean, I'm a hell of an example of that, too. This time last year, I'm passing out in the cab of my truck for 3.5 hours, and hey, I'm giggling about that. I mean, my blood pressure's funny. It looks like a damn slot machine, right? And now it's normal, man, because that's helped out like you would not believe. And it is all because of Premier Weight Loss, not just because I'm a spokesperson for them, but it's all because of them. Now, obviously, I've been motivated to redo my diet and stuff, but yeah, they got me on track when nobody else has. I mean, I haven't been this weight since 1983.
Yeah, that's cool.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I'm like 178, I think, right now.
Well, it gives you a peace of mind for sure, right? Knowing that you're better on it with the health. Pacers Bucks give you peace of mind because it gives me some worry.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about it too. I said yesterday I don't give a damn if Damian Lillard does come back. Great, come back in game number 2. You should not. This is not a Pacer team that I would expect anybody would hope that they need to sidestep talent here. They should have talent enough to be able to advance. So I don't want to hear any of that. Last year they got fortunate. That's great. But this is why you trust this team. But it's going to be hard because you've got Giannis, and if you get Lillard back, that'll be something. You got to run it. You got to run it up and down the floor, play your pace. Halliburton has to be Halliburton offensively in terms of scoring, and then getting everybody else scoring as well.
Lillard is interesting because, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm with you. I mean, I don't know. he's a great player for sure. But, John, if he comes back, I think it's going to take them a game or two to reacclimate with him. You know what I mean?
You made a point to that dude from Milwaukee about, in this case, playing how you're playing right now and not wanting to lose that. I think there's something to say to that. And I thought he made a good point about, they're going to have him on a minutes restriction anyway, so maybe that plays a role. And Marcus Johnson, a white man, he can't jump.
That's right.
Raymond was awesome.
I'm telling you, man. Wouldn't you have it on your business
I'm gonna go
card?
get my gun and shoot everybody's ass.
I'm the guy that Jordan had on his wall. That would be literally, if that's not on his
imagine?
social media profile,
Yeah.
then I mean,
Is there anything better than that? I wonder who Tom Brady have on his wall. Cheryl
Giselle.
Teagues, probably Cheryl Teagues.
Joe Montana.
here's the only thing better than having Jordan on your wall would be playing on a team where a different guy on the team actually is the one that guarded him from the majority, but then you spend a lifetime getting credit for shutting him down.
It's kind of like when Greg Anthony wore the Ball State hat. Remember that? That was like the ultimate sign of respect.
Yeah.
Back in 1990 when Greg Anthony of UNLV rocked the Ball State hat after Ball State almost beat him.
They did,
Yeah.
man. That's still. They should have beat him. I still
still
maintain
should've.
there was a foul at the end of that game that wasn't called.
Love me some Chandler Thompson, baby.
All right,
Love
John's up next. He'll carry you home. Pacers, Bucks, game 1 tomorrow. We'll talk about that and get you set for game number 2, obviously, when we return on Monday. Thank you for listening to Query & Company.